Okay, I'm starting off today's class running. Okay, there's no Mills the Bedicha. The Mills the Bedicha is the class itself. Okay, I want to have a conversation with you, and I want you to respond. I want you to respond freely. This is going to sort of be like I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to tell me what you think, and we're going to explore it from there. Okay. There's an entire school of thought that's called biology, right? Biology is the study of living things. That's what it is. It's a study of living things. A significant portion of biology is human biology. And of course, biology exists on many levels. Biology exists on levels of the acquisition of energy, the sustaining of body parts, the protecting the body from the environment, the process of eating and trying not to be eaten, right? Those are all parts of biology. Those are very basic, rudimentary levels of biology. Then, of course, you have what's called the nervous system. The nervous system affects awareness, that you're aware of your environment and you react to it, you respond to your environment. The base of the nervous system, the center of the nervous system, is the brain. Now, there are living things, and I know very little about biology, but the little bit that I know, there are living things that are so primitive, they're so basic, they don't really have a brain. They just have neurons, they just have neurological responses, and it allows them to run away from danger, to sneak up on prospective food, and to react. The more sophisticated an animal is, and of course, Lahav Elf Avi Avdalos, a human being, the more sophisticated is their nervous system, and the more sophisticated is their brain. Human beings have an aspect of the brain that no animals have, not even Lahavdol, the highest primates, right? From what I understand, it's called the prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for a lot of very sophisticated aspects that are unique to human beings, lahavdol, to separate absolutely from all animals. Amongst them is deliberateness. Right? The prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain, can tell the emotions of the brain, can tell the excitable parts of the brain, calm down, keep your head, stay focused, let's think this through. And it's a very, very sophisticated part of the brain. So the way I understand it, and again, I don't understand it that well, but the way I understand it, there is, I think it's the brainstem, the back of the brain, which is called in evolutionary biology, which we're not talking about because we don't exactly believe in 100%, the oldest part of the brain. It's the place of reflex, of spontaneous reaction, right? What they call in behavioral studies, fight or flee. You have a split second. Somebody is coming after you. Should I stand and fight or should I run and save myself? It's the seat of reflex. It's the seat of the deepest gut reactions. And to a very great extent, it's the place from which people survive. We survive because we have strong instincts that allow us to respond reflexively, almost without thinking, in a very, very short interval of time. Then we have a more sophisticated part of the brain, which allows us to feel, not just to feel fear or pleasure or excitement, but to feel love, to feel accepted, to feel paranoid, to feel important, to feel unimportant. This is a much more sophisticated part of the human brain, and it allows us very, very sophisticated human interactions, right? We're not precocious, we're not, solitary creatures. We're precocious creatures. We're social creatures, and our societies are very complex because we are capable of incredibly um, sophisticated emotion that allows us to feel ourselves, allows us to read cues from other people's feelings, and develop hierarchies of community and so on and so forth. And of course, above that, we have the most sophisticated part of the brain, which is really the most deliberate, where I actually have the power to control my reflexes, my impulses. The oldest part of the brain is completely reflexive. A newer part of the brain is much, much more complicated, but it also is very, very emotional. And the newest part of the brain, the part of the brain that makes us human, lahavdil elef avi avdalos, can say, whoa, 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 I'm going to think about this, and I'm going to deliberate, and I'm going to choose. So far, so good. Melly, so far, so good. Any comment? I can't hear you. I really can't hear you. I don't know why, but I can't hear you. Maybe it's my computer. So just give me thumbs. I'll know that you're listening. Okay, very good. Now, I gave you this whole lesson in biology, not because I'm interested in biology, not because I know anything about biology. I gave you this discussion of biology because I want to set up how you would say the very, very same thing in the Lashon HaChasidus. I basically described 3 parts to the brain, and I chose to describe the brain in 3 parts because it serves my purpose. It serves my purpose in reflecting how it would be understood in Hasidus. Hasidus talks about the human being and says that we're comprised of a Chabad and a Chagas and a Nehi. The highest third of the human brain is the Chabad. The middle third of the human brain, or the middle response system, is the Chagas. The lowest third of the human responsive system would be the Nehi. Netzach then you say. And of course, the way it's explained in Hasidus, the Nehi is in the Kishkis, it's down here, it's in the liver, or it's in the kidneys. The Chagas is in the chest and the torso, the heart and in the lungs, and the Chabad is in the brain. That's how it would be explained in Torah. So here is my question, and I need you to answer the question. You're being very quiet. This question I need you to answer. Which is the deepest part of the person? Is the deepest part of the person the Nehi, the reflex, impulsive, fight or flee instinct level of the brain? Or the very deliberate, I can control not just myself and my environment, but my emotions and direct them where I wish for them to be directed? The what they call the prefrontal cortex, which is the deepest part of the human brain, the part of the brain that does everything reflexively and instinctively, or the part of the human brain that does things very, very, or tries at least to do things very, very deliberately and controlled and methodical and thought through and so on. That's a question. What do you think? Are you not able to talk? Are you Pasha not able to talk? I can't hear a word. I Pasha can't hear you. Maybe you have your sound off or something. Okay. Can you talk now? I still can't hear a word. Okay, we got a problem. Okay, so I'll have to do all the talking. This was supposed to be an interactive class. It was supposed to be tshuva for yesterday's filibuster. It was supposed to be today's interaction class. So I'll talk for you. Okay, I hope I don't. If you're totally frustrated and absolutely disagree with what I'm saying, you'll swing both of your hands like this, and I'll know that I'm doing something terribly wrong. Okay, otherwise I'm just going to keep talking. The description that I just gave, that there's a part of the brain that's very visceral. That's the word that they use. And viscera, by the way, means the kishkis, which means it responds and reacts very from the guts. It's an instinct. It's a split second, fraction of a second decision. Fight or flee is called the nihi. The higher emotions, the emotions that allow a person to experience love and fear and intimacy and uncertainty, is the chagas. And of course, the deliberate part of the brain, the part of the brain which I can consciously control my responses much, much more, is called the chabad. So the question that I asked you a moment ago was, which is the deepest part of the brain? And the answer to that question is, it depends how you define the word depth. It depends by the word depth. If you define the word depth by how deep into the subconscious of the person you go, there's no question. The deepest part of the person is the nihi. The lowest level of responses that a human being has are yechida, really. The survival instinct is exactly that. It's an instinct. An instinct means it's not thought through, it's not deliberate, it's not a process, it's a reaction. And it's a reaction that comes from the very deepest place in the subconscious of the soul. So if you're talking about what touches the deepest parts of a person, there is no question that the deepest parts of the person are the parts of the person that respond reflexively, without thought, just instinctive response. Something happens and you react. That comes from a very deep place in the person. Now, of course, we know that the simplest of animals have considerably developed what we would call nihi, right? Reflexes, ability to react and to respond. They have no ability to deliberate. They can't think through. They can't plan. They certainly can't change their nature, but they have very, very strong reflexes. And a human being, lahavdil, also has. The nihi of the person is the deepest part of the person because it goes to the deepest levels of the neshama. The place in you from which you react to extreme events, whether they're dangerous or they're positive, in an extreme way, comes from a very deep place in you. Now, I want you to know, and this I'm saying parenthetically, but I'm not saying it parenthetically because I really want to tell it to you. According to Hasidus, that's the place from which Mesiras Nefesh comes. The idea that a Jew is prepared to give away his life for his cause. B'chlal, even a soldier on the front. A soldier on the front who finds himself in a very dangerous position. And his commander says to him, hold your position to the last man. Hold your position at all costs. Because you're protecting a flank, or you're protecting a retreat, or you're protecting a larger body of men. For a person to stand in that position, knowing that the chances of his survival are 1 in 10, or 1 in 25, or 1 in 100, and to stand and fight, that doesn't come from the sophisticated kind of brain. That comes from the guts. That comes, to use a cliche term in the military terms, it comes from training. That comes from the ability to not think. The only way a human being can be in certain danger and stand their ground is not because they're moyach shal talalev, but because there's no moyach. That's the nihi. And again, lahavdil elef alfi avdolos and avodas Hashem, it's the seat of Mesiras Nefesh. It says in Basi Lagani that the highest levels of Mesiras Nefesh come from netzach, not from chokhmah, not from bina, from netzach, from determination, from stubbornness, from connectivity. The idea that a Jew can give his life to sanctify the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not to separate from Hashem is not a deliberate process. It's not a deliberated process. It's a spontaneous, it's a visceral process. It comes from the very essence of the neshama that says, I cannot be cut off from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, period, the end. Okay? Now, so again, the question that I asked you was, if you divide the soul into Chabad, Chagas, Nihi, and you ask which is the deepest, so in terms of how deep into your subconscious it goes, there's no question that the Nihi is the deepest. Okay? But there's another side to that coin. When I say what is the deepest, I also mean what is the most sophisticated. Right? What is depth? Depth is that I can respond reflexively? No. Depth is I can think things through. I can understand things well. I can emotionally respond to things with a sensitivity and with a nuance and with a care and with a gentleness. So there's a very, very different use of the word depth. There's a very, very different use of the word depth. There's a use of the word depth, which means it's not coming from the deepest place in me, but it's the deepest. It's a part of me which has the most depth. It's the most sophisticated. It's the most sensitive. It's the most capable of tolerating complexity and contradiction and so on and so forth. So the word depth can be defined in two ways. Depth means it's coming from the deepest place in me, and depth means it's the most sophisticated part of me. That's the way this plays out. Okay? Now, are we good? I need you to give me thumbs or a nod or a whatever it is. Just don't wave your hands to tell me that you don't agree with what I'm saying. We good? Okay, now, why am I telling this to you? I'm telling this to you because we are learning a maimed that talks about the concept of a light and a vessel, oyer and keli. One of the models, one of the mishalim for a light and vessel, oyer and keli, is the neshama and a guf. So I'm going to ask you a dumb question, a really, really dumb question. What's deeper, your guf or your neshama? What is deeper, your body or your soul? Now, of course, it gets tricky because the body by itself is just chemicals. Body by itself is just carbon mixed with water and a bunch of other stuff. So when I say the body, I don't just mean the biomass. I mean the base of the person. I mean the truth of the matter is I don't know exactly how to define where body ends and where soul begins. But I don't only mean the dust from which the body is formed. I mean the form of the body, the definition of the body, the basic functions of the body versus the more sophisticated functions of the body. Or to say it perhaps a little differently, nefesh hakis versus nefesh bahamis even. Okay? You have a body and a soul. There's light and vessels. I'm going to ask you the question a second time. What is deeper, your body or your soul? What's deeper, your body or your soul? What is deeper, your nefesh hakis or your nefesh bahamis? Now, it sounds like an unfair question. It sounds like a setup question. It sounds like a question that whatever you're going to say is going to be wrong. And that's true. It is a setup question. Because when I ask the question, and of course I'm asking the question rhetorically, what is deeper, your body or your soul? It's the same thing as asking what is deeper, your nehi or your chabad. What is deeper? Depends how you look at it. If you're saying what is deeper, the body of the soul, in terms of who I am, I'm the body. The human being is fundamentally their body, their self-identity, their ego. That's who I am. Because that's who I am, my body, my guf, my basic self is my depth. In other words, the deepest expressions that are going to come out of me are a reflection of my basic biology, my basic definition as the Eibishter made me, which is my body. But on the other hand, if I'm talking about sophistication and richness and a capacity for involvement with Hashem on higher levels, of course the deepest part of me is going to be my soul. Because the neshama is much more sophisticated than the body. The neshama is much more sophisticated than the animal soul. So the neshama is far more capable of being involved in higher and deeper and greater things. Okay, so just like you can understand that when you compare and contrast Nihi and Chabad, you can give both answers. Which is deeper, Nihi or Chabad? The answer is, in terms of what's more visceral, what's more survival, it comes from the Nihi. In terms of what's more sophisticated and what's more meaningful and what's more human, so you would say the Chabad. You can say the same thing about the Oyer and the Keli, the body and the soul. You have a body and you have a soul. Your body is your depth in a fundamental way, or to use a word which is maybe bad, but I'll use it anyway. In terms of your nature, in terms of your personality, in terms of who you are, your body is the deepest part of you. But in terms of who you could become, in terms of what you could accomplish and achieve, the deepest part of you is your neshama. Okay? So just like you can understand that when you talk about what's the deepest part of You can give two answers. On the one hand, the Nehi is the deepest part of you. It's the most visceral, it's the most reflexive, it's the most instinctive, it's the most survivalist part of you. And on the other hand, the prefrontal cortex, the Chabad, the planning part of the brain, the deliberate, the ability to control self part of the brain is the deepest. You can understand the same thing about the question of the body and the soul. And you can understand the same thing about the question of the vessel and the light. That in a way the vessel is the deepest thing, that's who you are. And the light is the deepest thing because it's the most sophisticated. Okay? So what I just did was called in psychology classic transference. Okay, I started off with A and I moved on to B and I moved on to C. A is the Nihi of the Nefesh versus the Chabad of the Nefesh. B would be the body of a person versus the soul of the person. And C would be a vessel in Atzilus versus a light in Atzilus. Are we good? Are we good? Are we clear so far? Good. Now, let's get to Shema. When it comes to Shema, the Rebbe tells us Shema and V'hoya im Shemaya both involve contradictions. And now, Meli, you'll begin to understand the filibuster, the rambling that was over your head yesterday. Now you're going to understand it. Okay? The first parsha of Kriyas Shema, its Keli is Chesed. Its Oyer is Gevura. Its body is Chesed. Its soul is Gevura. The second parsha of Kriyas Shema, its body is Gevura, its Keli is Gevura, and its soul, its Oyer is Chesed. Do you hear what's going on, Mel? Do you understand what I just did? I set up a lecture. I started in left field, and now it's all coming home. The first kasha of Krishma's basic definition is Chesed. Its neshama, its sophisticated definition is Gvura. The second pasha of Kriya Shema, its basic definition is Gevura. Its sophisticated definition is Chesed. How do these mixes and matches take place? So there's this really weird, exotic, hard to understand concept in Zohar. It's really hard to understand. Chassidus really struggles to figure it out. Called V'chalifu d'chtayu. Neshamas can be mixed and matched. You can take a neshama from one and put it into the next. You can put a light from one midah into the keli of different midah. And what these things means is far beyond the scope of our conversation here, but you should just be aware that it's a complicated situation with my modem contradicting each other, my modem saying I don't understand, my modem finally explaining it and not being sure they understand it, and so on and so forth. Bottom line is, that's what our Maimer says. The body of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is Chesed. Its soul is Gevura. The body of Ahoyim Shemei Tishma Mitzvah is Gevura. Its soul is Chesed. Okay, I need you to tell me that you understand. Okay, so now, I'm going to ask you an ultimate question. The first parsha of Kriyas Shema, its body, its base, its foundation is Chesed. Its oir, its neshama, its sophistication is Gevura. So is the first parsha of Kriyas Shema more Chesed, or the first parsha of Kriyas Shema more Gevura? Which is it more? How are you supposed to answer the question if I can't hear your voice, right? There's nothing going on. I don't know why I can't hear you. You understand the question? You understand the dilemma? And the Tzemach Tzedek is saying this. Tzemach Tzedek wants you to know. Okay, if you could speak, I really would love to hear your voice. But if you can't speak, I'll talk it out for you. Okay, I'll talk it out for you, and hopefully it'll be consistent with what your thought process is. The first parsha of Krishma Chesed means you cannot change the basic nature of anything. It's almost impossible. Just like a person who has a Chesed personality may have a very Gevura brain. He may use his brain to try and do everything in a Gevura way. But if his base, if his Nihi, if his body, if his basic self is Chesed disposed, you never really get away from that as hard as you try. The foundation of the first parsha of Kriyas Shema is Chesed. What is Chesed? So if this was a philosophy class, I would tell you, want to understand Chesed? Study water. What do you know about water? You know that water is a adhesive, right? the nature of water molecules is that they stick to each other, right? Now, the bonds are very weak. They're not very strong bonds, which is why they very, very easily roll off each other, which makes them viscous. It makes them a fluid rather than being a solid. But liquid, water, has a bonding property. It also has another property, and that is that liquid is a solvent. A solvent means it melts things. So if you have in water schmutz, the water is going to dilute it. It's going to dilute it so much that the particles of schmutz inside the water are going to become so inconsequential and so imperceptible, so invisible, that they're basically going to become water. That's chesed. Chesed makes a person's life into a cholent. You take a person that did 1,000 actions, make them into one thing. If a person did 1,000 actions and you make them into one thing, the person is defined by one thing. If they're mostly good, you call them a good person. If they're mostly bad, you'll call them a bad person. Because the secondary characteristics, the parts of the person which are not so good, are not seen. Okay, so the basic characteristic, the foundational definition of the first parasha of Kriyas Shema is chesed, kindness. Don't notice differences. Now, another word for chesed, this is very, very important because that's what the Maimed is about, is that chesed is ahava. Chesed is ahava. Ahava means love. What's the connection between the word chesed and the word ahava? What's the link between the word chesed and the word ahava? The answer basically is, and basically is a big bad word, I'm allowed to use it because I'm the one who declared it big and bad, so I can break my own rules. The reason chesed is linked to ahava basically is because water's nature of adhesion, water's nature, you put one particle of water here, another part of particle next to it, they will magnetically draw together. Ahava means a connection between one thing and another. What does love mean? Love means I want to be close to you. Love is an emotion which has a want. I want to be close. That is a property of water. Just like water has a nature of adhesion, a molecule of water, a molecule, they'll find their way together. A person and a person whose basic character is one of water, of mayim, of chesed, of ahava, will find a way of merging with that other person. That's the nature of midas ha'av. Okay? So the first parasha of Kriyas Shema is chesed. What is chesed? Number one, adhesion. The molecules stick to each other, at least to a degree. Number two, they're solvent. They ignore secondary characteristics, which is why midas chesed is wonderful. If you are not perfect and you're judged kindly, then stuff about you that's not perfect, no one's going to notice. It's diluted in the majority, which is good. Number three, this is important for the Maimed. Chesed is ahava. Ahava means I love. I love everything. I love means I naturally join. I adhere. I come together with and become one with other things. Okay? Now, what about Gvura? Gvura is fire. What does fire do? Fire crumbles. Right? Fire rises up. We know that. Fire goes up. It's running away from the world. But what it leaves behind, it breaks apart into particles of dust. It's the exact opposite of chesed. If chesed is a property of adherence, of an adhesive, yes, and it's a solvent, it dilutes. Fire is opposite in both ways. It separates, and B, it doesn't dilute, it accentuates. Which is why, Melly, if you're being judged in a court of law by midas hagvura, you can never be good enough. If 99% of your actions are perfect, they're going to find that 1% and they're going to squeeze them and they're going to accentuate them and they're going to emphasize them until you're finished. Because that's the nature of gvura. It splits apart and notices every detail. Okay? Now, in terms of relationship with Hashem, it's midas hayira. What is fear? Fear means one of two things. A, I'm afraid of getting too close. Or B, I'm afraid of losing my closeness. But the emotion of fear is not an emotion of being drawn to something. The emotion of fear is an emotion of having a distance from something. Sometimes the distance means I want to stay away. Sometimes the distance means I want to be close, but not too close. That's the nature of Gevura. That's the nature of Gevura, the nature of Yira. Okay, so now, are we good? I need you to give me thumbs if we're good. Okay, now, so I want you to think about this. If the Parsha of Krishma's Guf is Chesed, and the Parsha of Krishma's Neshama is Gevura, the Parsha of Krishma's Guf is an adherent, it's an adhesive, and it's a solvent. Its basic nature is it wants to become attached to what's around it. And its soul is Gevura. It's the exact opposite. It wants to run away, wants to split and to divide, and to notice every detail. So what is the first Parsha of Krishma more? Is it Chesed with a little Gevura, or is it Gevura with a little Chesed? Is the first Parsha of Krishma predominantly Midas HaChesed, is a little Gevura sprinkled in? Or is the property of the first Parsha of Krishma predominantly Midas HaGevura with a little Chesed sprinkled in? And you know what the answer to that question is? It depends how you look at the first Parsha of Krishma. If you look at the first Parsha of Krishma based on the nature of the person saying it, it's Chesed. If you look at the first Parsha of Krishma based on the choices the person is making and the deliberate actions that the person is doing it, the first Parsha of Krishma is Gvura. I'm going to say it again, Melly. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time.
Grab money. You want to come say goodbye to Sheena?
When is she leaving? How long?
Right now. How much money should I give her? 40, 50? How much give the kids?
No, I gave them 60.
She's only going 3 weeks. You give her 60?
Do it if you want.
You don't have.
Hundreds. Okay.
I think I have 15.
Here's another 20.
So how much I get? 60, I say?
Yeah. So give it what you want. Okay, sorry,
How much was you instinct to give her?
60. She went to 3 weeks. Listen, tell her to come down. I'm in the middle of a shit. I'm pushed in the middle of talking. Okay. I have to run. My daughter's running to camp. So I'm going to sort of a little bit abruptly end the shir, okay? Your basic nature is chesed. You're a kind person. You like to be close to others. You don't like to notice subtle faults. That's your personality. That's your nature, okay? If you become a person who becomes very critical and very judgy, you never become fully that. Your basic nature is kindness. So when I ask you, what are you more? Are you more kind? Are you more severe? The answer to that question depends how you're looking at it. If you're looking at it in terms of who I am, I'm more of a chesed person. If you're looking at it in terms of what I want to be, what I'm trying to do, you're more a Gvura person. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek is trying to explain. You want to understand the first Parsha of Shema? Think about a person whose base is chesed and whose sophistication is Gvura. You want to understand the second Parsha of Shema, V'hayim Shameya? Think about a person whose base is Gevura and whose sophistication is Chesed. Now I got to run. I'm sorry, this is a great class. And I'm sorry that I can't hear you. And I'm sorry that I'm running, but my daughter has to leave to go into the airport. So I'll see you tomorrow morning. Okay, just give me that you heard me. Okay? Good, I'll see you tomorrow. Again, I apologize.